What if the way you dressed in the morning is impacting how you speak, show up, and lead more than you realize? Today, we're talking about connection, not just with others, but with yourself, and how something as simple as what you wear can completely shift your confidence, your presence, and your voice. Welcome to Communication Skills for Working Women. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Rose May. Do you find yourself second guessing or avoiding conversations because you're worried about being misunderstood?
You're not alone. On this show, we're sharing tangible tools for assertiveness, emotional resilience, and real-life communication wins and fails.
Let's sharpen our communication together. If you've ever felt disconnected from yourself or unsure how to show up fully in your work and life, this episode will give you a completely different way to think about it. Follow the show and share it with someone who needs this conversation.
Today, we are joined by Dr. Sweta, a speaker, facilitator, and leadership coach who empowers professionals to reinvent how they work and lead for greater impact and well-being. Dr. Sweta is a step into your Moxie Vocal Empowerment Certified Facilitator, author of the book, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What?, which she is generously sharing with all of you, and a contributor to the award-winning anthology, She's Got This, essays on standing strong and moving on. She has spoken on stages and panels, including at the White House, and has been a facilitator for Hewlett-Packard and the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. What stands out about Sweta's work is her focus on connection, how we connect to ourselves, our voice, and how we show up in the world. We are so glad that you are here with us, and
Yes,
I
we
am
are.
so excited because I've gotten to hear her in person, and I can tell you that connection is something she just brought to the stage with her presence.
Mm.
Immediately, I was like, oh my goodness, I feel connected to Dr. Sweta. So thank you for
Mm,
coming.
Yeah, much
thank you.
appreciated.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. And I have to say, it was such an easy yes when I saw your podcast invite because connection is my top value, both personally and
Mhm.
professionally, along with the other values that you listed in your podcast. I was like, there is so much alignment here.
I agree. Visiting with you, I totally agree. I was like, I think we're on the same page completely.
Absolutely.
Dr. Sweta, we want to start with your story. We want to start with your story. The time is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, so like most people, especially at this point in our life, our stories are quite vast. And the aspect that I want to really share with you and what we connected on regarding connection is around clothing and how clothing helps me feel connected and how I use clothing to help me to connect to others. And so I'd like to share a little bit about my journey. So when I grew up, I am of Indian origin. I'm an immigrant, and I grew up in a completely Hispanic neighborhood. And by third grade, I started to get bullied, which is kind of interesting. You know, being an immigrant amongst immigrants, I was still an outsider. And one of the brilliant ways that I chose to survive that scenario, and I say brilliant because I think a lot of us lean on ways, we adapt to our environments to survive, to be able to navigate challenging situations. And for me, it was two things. One was to dim myself by changing the way I dressed. So you can literally see in my school pictures, first, second, third grade, I'm wearing cute dresses. My mom would put her Indian jewelry on me. And then you can see like fourth, fifth grade, how much my clothing changed.
Mm.
And I made this kind of decision. Obviously, it wasn't conscious. I was a little girl. But if I wear baggy clothes and don't wear anything bright, I won't bring any attention to me because attention was negative.
Mhm.
And the other thing I did was become a people pleaser. So it was, if I can become everyone's best friend, then that protected me from ever being, from being bullied. And honestly, it really worked. It worked
Mhm.
really, really well. I was part of quote unquote one of the popular groups by the time I graduated. But the interesting thing is, as I was moving towards eighth grade, I went to a school that was like first to eighth. I started playing tennis. And as I started to play tennis, it made me lose weight, it made me help feel stronger in my body. And I decided to wear a dress for the prom and also for graduation. And I got attention for doing that because it's noticeable when you don't dress up and then suddenly you start to wear something that is a lot more feminine. It felt uncomfortable, but the cool thing was that when I was a freshman in high school, my family decided to move. And I made this inner like realization that nobody knows me here. Nobody knows my story. So it was my very first reinvention. I've been known to be the reinvention queen, and I'd say that was my very first reinvention. And so I was still feeling good in my body because I was playing tennis regularly. I decided, you know what? I'm going to start dressing up again. And so I would literally save my lunch money so that I could buy clothes from consignment shops. And I would put these outfit together as platform shoes, dresses, just the most interesting outfits. And I grew up in a immigrant household, which was very conservative. And my brother was like this older protective brother. And he would literally say to me, like, if you wear that, I'm not driving you to school. And so
Oh,
I would put my clothes in my book bag and then change while I was there. And so again, it was this like indirect but brilliant way for me to get my needs met, whether that was safety or expression. Then again, the story continues, which was at towards the end of high school, and I even won runner-up for best dress, which was super cool. But again, it had nothing to do, in these stories about, it was in response to my environment, but it was really about me, right? That the
mm,
clothing made me either feel safe or it made me feel expressed. And then I got into this terrible car accident my senior year. And I can pinpoint now, after kind of doing a lot of reflection work, that's where I became that not only people pleaser, but then I added on perfectionist and kind of controlling and overachiever type of person because it was a traumatic experience for me. And so when I went to college, I attended a 6-year pharmacy school. I shifted the way I dressed again. And it's just, so it's really interesting to see the first 2 years, you know, turns out I never wanted to be a pharmacist. That's another reinvention much later down the line. But the first 2 years, you could see that I was still dressing up. But as I started to get more into the pharmacy academics, my clothing shifted. And so there's this real pattern to the way that I dress with what was happening in my life. And I started to become more serious. I used to cut my hair, color it, dye, curly, permed hair, crooked hair. I used to iron my hair. I mean, there was all these forms of expression. And I hadn't afterwards, after graduating pharmacy school, I didn't do anything with my style or my hair was very like office clothes, being kind of simple, serious. And it wasn't until about, I'd say almost like 8 years ago, where this desire to start expressing myself again. And what I can say to you now is that I was being called by the feminine, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But it was, just this desire again to like be more me, be more in my authenticity. And I went through a huge reinvention, which I won't get into right now. You can actually read about it in my book, which everyone can download for free. We'll kind of drop the link later on. But I left my profession. Uprooted my family from New York to California. And I made this commitment to really root into my authenticity. And I didn't know what that meant. But as Elizabeth, from hearing some of my story on stage at a recent event, my son was born premature, and it was a big wake-up call for me. And I saw the cost of being so disconnected from myself. And when most women actually lose themselves is when I started to find myself, and that was in motherhood,
mm.
because of that experience. And so I made this declaration of I am going to be fully me, whatever that means. And part of the way that showed up was through clothing again. And I was on a journey to become a professional speaker. And as anybody here can imagine, like, what do they say? Speaking is the number one fear, even more than death. It,
Yeah.
right? It's so incredibly confronting. And I found myself taking a soul style class. And this
Mm,
class was so intriguing to me. And the idea behind it is You have to get dressed every single day. And why not make it a ritual? Not everybody has the time or the ability to maybe meditate and journal and do all the things everybody tells us to do. But this is a very practical thing that we need to do. So why not make it sacred? And because I had this passion for in fashion, I was very drawn to this idea of like connecting to my soul through clothing. And through the process, we do these meditations where you actually connect to different parts of energy centers in your body, and you pay attention to if any colors or materials start to come up. And I started to see fabrics from my country, from India. And as you know,
Oh,
India is very colorful. We have
mm,
so many saris and I started wearing those clothing, and particularly as I started speaking on stage. And what I noticed was how much more calm and connected and in my confidence I felt on stage. It was as if my ancestors were holding me in, what was very intimidating environments because as we said, speaking is can be so scary in general, but I was in rooms where I was often the minority. I was the only woman of color. So I had that double kind of feeling of, again, those old memories of not being safe. And it really made a big difference for me. And so if you look at, oftentimes when I'm speaking, you'll see some elements of clothing from my country, that event that we met at Elizabeth. And then I even brought it into that talk, which I hadn't expected, was to talk about how, you know, my mom couldn't even choose who to marry. And here I am on stage using my voice, wearing clothing from my own country. It's more than beauty in the outer way that we've been taught, the way that beauty has totally been butchered in our patriarchal world. Beauty is such a powerful frequency for women to embody if they truly make it their own. And I find clothing is one of the most fun and powerful ways to do that. The last thing I'll just share around this is when I was going through this journey, I was split, because of the way beauty has, the way women are shown in magazines, and I was on this kind of sacred journey. I wanted to feel very sacred and soulful. And then somebody said something to me which shifted everything for me, which was, don't they adorn the goddesses in your lineage, in your culture? And so technically I'm Hindu. And yes, if you go to a Hindu temple, they have deities, God Lakshmi, you might have heard of some of them, Kali, and every day they bathe them and they adorn them with the most beautiful fabrics and jewelry. And suddenly it just really cemented this thing that I was feeling, but had a different message because of what I was experiencing in society around how sacred it is to adorn ourselves and really embody beauty in this way.
I'm writing things down because I'm having like 5 million thoughts come to my mind at
Too.
once.
I'm like, we prepped and have questions, but I kind of want
I'm
to
not reading those questions.
share
Uh,
my thoughts and ask some other follow-up questions.
yes, so many things. And
All
my
right.
brain is just like, my brain is going berserk as a mental health professional because there's so many different things that you're talking about here that I think we just live life and maybe we don't recognize our part of this human experience. One of those things is the adaptive functioning that you're talking about, like learning to shrink so that you're not standing out and you're not picked on and just like honoring that part of you, but also the minority stress that you're feeling as being the only person who looks like you in certain places and situations, and the human development part of you that is trying to discover and figure out who you are and where you are, the emotional regulation, and even the way that clothing is. And I now I feel like clothing is not the word that I want to use, but dressing ourselves, I'll use your word, adorning ourselves is
Mhm.
one thing that is controllable. And so there's just, oh my gosh, there's so many things here. And I love how you're phrasing this because I have teenagers right now who are looking
Mhm.
for jobs, who are going here, who are going there, and they tell me that I sound like a boomer because I'm always talking about how, no offense to anyone who's a boomer, about how how your clothes, how there is something powerful in the way that you dress. And I've been like both cursed and blessed with love of fancy stuff. And so my dress is always fancy, right? But not for anyone else, but I feel good and not good above other people, but I feel good when my dress is aligned with how I want to show up in the world and like what's going on internally. So I'm just really connecting with how you're speaking about all of this and this internal connection. Like it is very, yes, it is very connecting for me. And I have some questions, but I know Elizabeth, you wanted to say some things.
Well, going off of this, like teenagers and like talking about the way that you dress, Sweta, I don't think I've ever heard anyone express so eloquently how adorning yourself, dressing yourself, how it can help you connect with yourself, connect with higher power, lift your vibration.
Hmm.
And then that translates into the office, that translates into your interactions, that translates into your connection with other people when you've taken that time. You might have even said sacred
Yeah,
time
sacred.
in
I
the
wrote it down. Yeah.
morning to, yeah, sacred moments in the morning to prepare to connect with yourself to go out into the world. And I'm just even thinking if I can switch my conversation with my children around self-expression through clothing to a sacred expression of who you are,
Hmm.
it brings
It
in
changes things.
it does such a different connection for
Hmm.
them as they're interacting with different people. I too loved how you talked about filling your needs of safety and expression,
Mhm.
and that one of the themes throughout everything you shared was this reflection. And I just thought, if I took time to sit back and reflect just on the way I have dressed
Mhm.
over my lifetime, what stories and things would I understand through a different lens just by getting curious around clothing and the
It's a
way that I
good
dress?
question.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a wonderful question. And as you mentioned, everything connection, right? Connection is the goal here. And the one of the best ways to connect is to reflect. And surprising to me as a coach, I discovered that that's not easy for people.
Hmm.
And so when you're kind of going in and asking some, you know, all of the dots that I've connected on my life, I just also want to say for any listeners here, like I've taken a lot of time on that journey to do this. So this wasn't something that has happened overnight. But like where to start because it can be incredibly overwhelming. But because clothing is so tangible, it's such an easy place to start. And, simply just asking, like, if you notice a shift in the way you dressed. I mean, look at even COVID, right? I think of it as, it's an opportunity. It's so interesting because I was just with some friends for a girls' weekend, and they were talking about how they're being called to go back to work. Because I'm usually around a lot of entrepreneurs. And so we were working from home for like a really long time.
Yeah.
But they have, typical corporate careers, and they all said to me that they dress differently. Like they wear jeans to work now. They don't have to wear the suits or dress a certain way. And some liked it, some didn't like it, which was really interesting, right? So even that curiosity from there, like because we all have an expectation of how we need to dress, right? And so you could start with how was I expected to dress in my home? Maybe what were the messages I
Mhm.
got from my parents? Like you're planting seeds in your children. Maybe they might not be responding to it now. It might later on, they might make that connection for themselves. But what were the messages that I got around in my home?
Mm.
And then from like, what is the expectation of how I should dress for my profession?
Yeah.
And does that feel good or does that feel off? To give you an example, I think the one piece that I really want to name here, and I really love the way you guys both contextualized my journey around, safety to expression to sacredness is kind of the arc of what fashion held for me. And as when I coach my clients, so many of them are in a phase of reclamation, right? They're wanting to the core pillar of my model, Leadership Beyond the Ladder, is root in your authentic identity. And whether they're consciously saying that's what they want to do or not, that is, they say, I want confidence. And to me, that's how to have greater impact, to have the confidence to have greater impact, you have to root deeper.
Hmm.
You have to know who you are. You have to feel an ability to be able to articulate who you are. And our clothing is one of those ways that we express ourselves. And so I've had friends, for example, that are Muslim that, started wearing hijab, and that was a huge act of reclamation for them.
Hmm.
And the shift that they saw, it was really interesting, is kind of being that go-getter woman, right? Work in a room, networking, and just by kind of going inward, dress was one of the things that she shifted. But there was other things that she shifted. She would say, I would go into a meeting now, go to a conference, and it was people would come to her.
Mm.
She didn't have to do the whole, like, I have to go connect with everyone.
Yeah.
The more you embody yourself, the truer connections start to magnetize towards you.
Mm.
I really see it as a frequency match,
Yeah.
especially if you're using it intentionally.
Hmm.
So I'd love to give another example. I see your face,
Please,
Elizabeth.
please,
I'm
Okay.
just,
please.
wow. Yes, please give another example.
Yeah.
So, for example, at the end of last year, I was feeling Miami calling me. Like I was like, I don't know, I'm feeling Miami. And if you know anything about Miami, it's very bright, it's very bold, and I was like, okay, that's the frequency because I often think we feel this quiet knowing and it's not tangible, so we sometimes dismiss it. But in the feminine, and I talk a lot about shifting from masculine power to feminine power, and feminine power to me is about creating, and it's creating from a seed. It's a frequency. It doesn't have form, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I was called to go to Miami, and I was like, I need to buy some new clothes as I go. So I bought this really bright orange, hot pink tiger sweater. I would
Yes.
never have worn anything like that before, but somehow I was like, if I'm going to Miami, because it would have stood out too much. I live in Berkeley, like area, which is not that's not really the type of clothing you see. And so I started wearing it, and it was really funny because there was in this it held two frequencies for me, which was what I also loved as well. And that's the beauty of this is that I really believe certain patterns, colors, textures, we have a meaning that, or something that we connect to it, and it can be interpreted differently for different people. And there was this whole TikTok trend called Dame un gur. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's like all those TikTok trends. So they do this whole Dame un gur, and like different people are going like this, and you have little kids to like elderly women doing it, and they do these little dance. And so jokingly with my son and everybody, I would just wear the sweater and I would be like Dame un gur, and my son and his friends would be like, "Oh, you're so cringe, right?" And later on, the school year started. Elizabeth, you and I have kind of talked about this. Another part of my story is having to advocate very fiercely for my son, who has several learning disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia,
Mhm.
ADHD, etc. And I was not being heard. I was not being heard. 7 IEP meetings, as you can imagine, feeling
7 IEP meetings?
7 IEP meetings and a ridiculous like the
Mm.
rage, right? That
Yes,
was inside of
yes,
me.
yes.
And as a vocal empowerment facilitator, we talk about one of the in my training is we have different archetypes for communication. We have the bunny, which as you can imagine is that kind of more that people pleaser, passive.
Mm.
The dragon, which is my way or the highway. But then other archetype we talk about is the cheetah. And it's because the cheetah has a flexible spine, it takes long strides, it has that teardrop. So I kind of symbolize that as emotional intelligence. And
Mm.
it rests a lot. It's very present. And so I use that sweater to invoke that energy as well in
Mm.
my meeting. And for it to hold two purposes. One was I was feeling a lot of anger and rage. And I don't want to bypass my emotions, but using like expressing my anger and rage to people who couldn't hear it was just a waste of my energy.
Hmm.
Mm.
So, how do I honor it without wasting my energy? And so I
Hmm.
wore that sweater to honor my rage, but also to remind me to be a cheetah. And
Mm.
so to know when I needed to be assertive, when I needed to pull back, and it made a huge difference because I wasn't wasting my energy yelling at people who couldn't hear it, I was able to hear when they would say something that I could leverage to
Mm.
a decision maker who could actually give me the support I needed. And it worked. I mean, not like, and that's not the whole, like, I'm not gonna tell the whole entire story. There's some other feminine principles that I brought in as well. And one of them is, kind of setting an intention and being open to receive a miracle. And we literally had a miracle happen that evening too, with, like I said, I won't get into details with it, but the part that I want to emphasize was as you use the words of like what we can control in ourselves, right? And so I think again, clothing has so many so many things it can gift us, as I've shared in my journey of it gave me safety, it gave me expression, and it gave me sacredness. And in this experience, it gave me my real powerful voice.
Yeah, for those of you who don't, can I share a little bit about what an IEP is? Is that okay?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
just thinking about because I think that makes I think that makes your story so much more poignant. So, an IEP is an individualized education plan, essentially, and it's actually a legally binding document that's written um, and developed by. So parents are involved, educators, specialists, and part of that is used to create some special education instruction, accommodation, interventions, right? To essentially to make sure that a student is able to receive to be able to be able to it's provide equity in the school system essentially is what it's designed to do and this is remarkable to me because with all the psyche evals I do, I write a lot of accommodations and I list all of those things out. And I don't get to go to those meetings. I've actually chosen not to. But the reason is partially to speak to what you're getting at. Like this is a very highly emotional situation and there are so many voices that are part of this meeting and oftentimes like I believe that parents are overshadowed by some of the needs or wants or desires of other educators. And so this is not putting anyone down by any means, but just my observation of from a yeah, looking at parents and like kind of their experiences and maybe this doesn't resonate with you, but it can be very intimidating, especially when you don't know what you don't know and you're walking into a meeting like this. And so I think it's important to put that into context and going
Mhm.
back to the cheetah and
Yeah,
understanding like how that fits into this environment and a situation that you had to do 7 times. Like that's
yes,
wild.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
wild.
yeah. And here's the thing, like sometimes we're put into these situations where we feel so powerless.
Hmm.
And I love sharing this story because again, a lot of the people I work with, whether they're consciously saying this or not, there's a reclamation of power that they're seeking.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you are following the World Cup, but
Hmm.
the Democratic Republic of Congo recently,
Yes.
how they reclaimed their
Yeah.
roots by adding the leopard print to their suits.
So beautiful.
Right?
Yes.
Right? How powerful is that
Yes.
after, being oppressed by a dictator for so long? And not all of us have that story. I have that story in my lineage of, having to being uprooted, et cetera. But we've all, especially if you're a woman, if you're, we've all been impacted by oppressive systems.
Hmm.
And, to think that something so simple as clothing, if we use it more consciously, what that can really shift for us.
I love that you're using that example because I have been following the everybody's outfits. One, because I just think it's cool. But two, the Cape Verde is another one. Like they walked in and I was like, you can just tell the way that there's an uprightness to them. And they're athletes anyway, so I think that naturally kind of comes along. But there is a visceral sense of pride in what they're wearing. You can just see it and you can feel it. And I think that same thing, it's attracted so much attention because of that. Going back to what you were saying about people being attracted to you.
Mhm.
Anyways, I think that's such a very that's such a very tangible example of the power
Mhm.
of clothing.
Mhm.
For our listeners, here's what we want you to take away from today. The way you show up externally is deeply connected to how you feel internally. And something as simple as what you wear can be a tool, not just for expression, but for grounding and confidence and connection. So this week, pay attention to how you feel in what you wear and experiment with choosing something that helps you feel more authentic, more like yourself, that helps you feel like you belong to yourself.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. We loved having you. And for all of our listeners, if this was helpful, share it and leave a review. And remember, speak clearly and listen bravely.
When you feel confident in your communication, everything changes.
We'd love to hear your wins, failures, and insights on Instagram at Communication Skills for Women. Leave a review and connect with us.
Until next time, speak clearly and listen bravely.